Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome back to Black Queer Canon. I'm Michaela Street.
And I'm Tre'vell Anderson, and we are your hosts for this show where we are trying to put some respect on the names of Black LGBTQ characters.
Every episode of our inaugural season, we're building out our very own canon of film and television characters that really have paved the way when it comes to Black, queer, and trans narratives on screen. And along the way, we'll be joined by a few special guests who will help us tease it all out. Tre'vell, who's on the list this week to be added into the canon?
All righty. We are doing something different this episode. We are adding two characters to the canon at the same time, and our guests will help us talk about both characters. Okay, the first character is Sophia Burset from Orange is the New Black, played by Laverne Cox. And the second character is Blanca Evangelista, okay, from the show Pose, okay, played by Michaela Jae Rodriguez. Now, I feel like when we talk about why these two characters are here on this list, it's a very simple conversation.
Right.
Okay, some of our other characters is a little bit more complicated. We want to dive, so we dive into what it means and whoop doop doop. But with these two characters, it's actually fairly, I feel like, black and white. With Sophia Burset, this was the character that, ushered in the quote unquote transgender tipping point.
Right.
All of the folks who do the consulting in Hollywood say that this character changed, the trajectory of trans representation in the industry. It kind of became the perfect example for why you should want trans people, why you should have trans actors playing trans characters. And obviously Laverne as the actress was able to spin this into, what is her career and visibility. I feel like she is probably, one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known Black trans public figure.
Right.
I feel like that is almost safe to say. But what I wanted to talk about with that character specifically is some of the scripting choices that they did. We often talk about, I think in television specifically, this characters written to educate people, like whose entire storyline is about and you can tell in the words that they're given to speak that this is we trying to teach the white people about this character, or in this case we trying to teach not trans people about this whole gender journey situation. And I feel like this show is one of those where so many of the pieces around the character are, at least the more pivotal stuff, I feel like as the show goes on, are around her transness and in this specific kind of complication between who she is and the environment at the penitentiary. How do you feel? Like I feel like there's a lot of comments that get made about the the acting of that show as a whole and maybe that character specifically. But part of it I feel like is also related to, them very clearly wanting to teach people.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't think that was too heavy-handed. I think that it was there, but it felt kind of natural. But I think that's also a product of the environment that she was in, right? Like, contrary to Poe, she wasn't in, an environment with a bunch of other trans girls where they didn't have to necessarily discuss these things, right? She's in an environment with a bunch of cisgender women who don't, know their own anatomy.
As we see in one of the scenes.
Right. Let alone know much about transitioning. So I thought that it was a great context to do those things. And I didn't feel like it was too heavy-handed. Occasionally I did, you could see it where it feels a little prescriptive, but I didn't think it felt overly so. But yeah, I agree that I think that the reason that this role is in the canon is because I think that there was kind of a setting of the bar.
Yeah.
That this is how you incorporate trans characters the right way. And then from there, everything kind of progressed, right? Or if you didn't measure up, right, then it wasn't right.
Absolutely. And then comparatively with Blanca, I feel like she's on this list because that bar that you said Laverne set Blanca as a character, I think, pushed it somewhere else.
Mm.
Sophia as a character is, a tertiary, she pops up she's there. She's certainly
Mhm.
there. I don't want to take anything away from that, but the show's not about her, you know? Whereas with Blanca as the lead of Pose, she's in every episode. She's the heart in so many ways of this show, and she's the person who you, I think, like unequivocally root for out of, most of the cast. And so I feel like in a way that Laverne as Sophia kind of set a bar, I feel like, Michaela Jae as Blanca set another bar.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in a different way, but I feel like that is why we find these two characters in particular on this list, and also grouped together because of that comparison.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Maybe this is a crude way to put it, but I think that in certain ways, Sophia ends up performing in this role that we historically have known
Mhm.
for queer characters in general,
Mhm.
right? To have been in, which is like the support role, the gay best friend, the gay
Very.
hairdresser.
Yes.
Literally, right?
Literally.
The
Quite
hairdresser,
literally.
right? And so I think that like that was her role, right? Which was like, this is how you do this, but also it's not about this
Yeah.
character. And to my point earlier, I think that putting because this was an ensemble cast and so many of them were trans, so many of the characters, not only the characters but the actors were trans, then it allows for so many other things. It
Mhm.
allows for this um again, hate this word, but like this normalization
Yeah.
of the quote unquote trans issue to make it about so many other things. And obviously, we can bring in, issues as it relates to them being trans where it pertains. But that doesn't have to be the thrust of the narrative. And so, this is how you can push forward and have other conversations, which gets to the idea of like humanizing these characters as more than their gender journeys, right? And I think that's what it really did. That's why people could identify with it, and that's why she is the heart of the show,
Mhm.
in so many ways.
One thing that I had not thought about until you just mentioned it, but both of these characters, have a
Right.
cosmetology,
Yes. Yes.
interest, which is this, we're obviously talking about these are trans characters, these aren't, gay characters, but that is a trope,
Mhm.
right? That we see queer and trans folks often, or characters often kind of attached to, in an interesting way. Laverne being the hairdresser, Blanca, did nails,
Right.
so
It's kind of interesting actually because, when you think about it, in many ways, especially after the first season, Pose becomes the flip of the narratives that we generally see, right? Is that
mm,
like generally we would only have seen, Blanca or a character like Blanca doing a character like, I don't remember her name in the show, but like Patty Lupone's character's nails,
uh-huh,
right? You know what I
uh-huh.
mean? But here we don't actually see Blanca doing nails all the time. Like that's her daytime job, but it's such a small part of her life that
Absolutely.
we see it here and there, but we are focused on the other half of her life, right? Which is I think I don't think that I've ever actually heard it framed in that way, but it's kind of interesting to think about is that okay, you've been seeing this character for years in this
Mhm.
super small supporting role. Now, what does it look like when they're not, when they are in frame? What is their life when they're not in
Absolutely.
the frame?
Absolutely. And both of the characters, even with Laverne, even with I keep stumbling over it because, I feel like the actors are, inescapable from
Mm,
these characters specifically. Like they've obviously played other things, but you gonna always know Laverne, I feel like, as Sophia Burset, and Michaela's always gonna be, Blanca.
it's interesting because I think that there's a a an urge to use Sophia and um Laverne interchangeably in a way that I don't know is the same with Michaela
Oh,
and
okay.
Blanca, and I feel that at least me mentally, but I partially think that is because of how fleshed out the characters are
Mm.
and how much time you spent with the characters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that like because we know so much, you know what I mean? Like it feels like a different person in a way that like if we only know little bits here and there about this other character, there's you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't do that work.
Yeah, and there's also this, scriptural, I will call it, like graduation, right? From Laverne being tertiary, she's present, but she pops up, here and there in the course of that show. And then once she gets out, we don't see her until the very last episode. They give her a couple moments, at her little beauty salon,
They gave her a great wig.
I'm glad she finally got one. Absolutely. On the show.
Right.
But then with Blanca, because she's the center, to your point, the fact that she does hair, or the fact that she is, what you call a manicurist,
Yeah.
okay, she does nails, it is background,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Very
and like
much.
this is what you can get, right, when you explore, right, the further depths of these characters and these possibilities beyond some of the, stereotypical type frames that I think they get forced into.
Yeah.
Okay, great opportunity, great moment for us to take a break. All right. And when we come back, we will be joined by one of my good Judies, okay, Shar Jossell, to talk about Blanca and Sophia.
Welcome back to Black Queer Canon. Joining us to break down all things Sophia and Blanca is journalist and cultural critic Shar Jossell.
Yay! Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Mikelle.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, Tre'vell. Oh, you all's names rhyme. I just noticed that.
They do.
I just noticed that.
They do.
They do.
Okay, so we're going to first talk about Sophia.
Okay.
Okay, then we're going to talk about Blanca.
Okay.
Take me back to 2012, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Orange is the New Black. This DVD service called Netflix is getting into streaming program.
Yes.
Orange is the New Black is one of their first series. You watch it and discover Laverne as Sophia Burset.
Mm-hmm.
Take me back to that moment. What do you recall? What do you remember about your kind of first introduction?
My first introduction. What's kind of wild is that I met Laverne months before it premiered. She was at an event called the Trans 100 in Chicago. And I walked right into her in the hallway. I was there with Janet Mock that year, who was a former mentor of mine. I hope she's well. But so I still remember when I watched the show, I did not know what to expect. But that pilot roped me in. And then by the time we got to episode 3, which we know is directed by the iconic Jodie Foster, Laverne's twin brother is in it, and he plays her pre-medical transition. I was hooked. I don't know if I necessarily felt represented, if that's your question.
It isn't, but
okay.
But you can go there. Go for
Yeah,
it.
let's go there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nice. The visibility was nice. And I liked when I think about the conversation in the country at the time.
There was a lot going on.
It was, but I don't remember people tripping over Laverne.
Yeah. We go
in a way in which they would today. So yeah. So it was
Yes.
I liked Sophia. I thought that she was funny. If it were up to me, she would have had more scenes and really been a part of like the Black Girl Club. She kind of felt like she was on an island of her own, and she was like this chameleon that went to, she was with Red in the Kitchen, and then she was with, gosh, who was my favorite? Gloria Mendoza was my favorite. I loved me some Mendoza, honey. Yes.
What about you, Michael? I know that you had not previously watched the show.
Really?
Prior to this project. So when you came to it in the year of 2025, what were your thoughts and feelings?
I didn't think really a lot. I mean, I obviously had heard about Laverne and her role in it and all that kind of stuff, but I had never gotten into the show. And it's weird because like I never even had started to watch an episode and then was like, oh, I don't like it. I just like never watched it. I think I just started watching other things instead. And so when I started watching it here, this year, I thought it was interesting. I was really surprised by what I thought were kind of progressive storylines even today around Laverne. But I also, this is, I don't know, take it for what it is, but to me, it also felt like, the heavy hand of like a GLAAD was involved behind the scenes to me, because I was like, there's no other way that this character was handled in the way that it was without that, which kudos.
Right.
But so I just had, the big thing for me with the character was I did think, oh, there are specific storylines, particularly around the marriage and the child and we talked about this before, like that it wasn't about like leaving her past behind and starting anew. It was about, well, this is my transition, but she kind of anticipated kind of living the same life, the same love and all of that, which is not something that I feel like we even still see today in narratives.
Well, we never see with the Black girls.
Right.
That's more of a white girl thing, I'd say. We don't, there is a running joke, but it is cultural that a lot of Black girls, if you don't transition by 30, you a lot of people just don't. Like, we're not transitioning at 45 and 50, once the family and kids and things like that are established, in a way in which a lot of white trans women exist, especially online and in pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that narrative specifically, I feel like, a lot in film and television.
Yes.
Scripted as well as reality.
Whether it's I Am Kate or Transparent. It's there.
It absolutely is there. I mean, we mentioned how obviously, and this kind of goes to your point talking about the GLAAD of it all, or maybe just the intention behind the character, right? This role set off a new era of conversation, at least in the industry, about visibility, specifically about trans characters, right? And having trans people play trans characters. The whole transgender tipping point Time magazine thing came out literally on the heels of the debut of this, hot new show, and Laverne was able to spin it into, what she has spun it into. But I want us to go a little deeper with the character. You already mentioned that Sophia is kind of on the periphery of every group. She's not with the Black girls like she should be, like the other Black girls are.
Yeah. Everybody's clicked off.
But she also, right, just to note, is a trans woman incarcerated in a women's prison, navigating various other, incarcerated folks' feelings about that. I remember the scene where she, they're trying to stop her from getting the care that she needs, and she like eats a bobblehead to like force a medical emergency. What scenes, what moments stick out to you that are memorable about that character?
I loved season 1 when she was the hairdresser. I was like, this is kind of stereotypical, but I think seeing those moments in her little makeshift salon, and having those moments with the inmates, with her other inmates, I thought that was fun to see. What was particularly frustrating, though, is it seems, and I haven't seen the show in years, but as the seasons progressed, they etched her out more and more. There was one season where they had her in solitary confinement, and it was just weird. It was like, okay, Laverne won booked like that. Like, she's available to act and have scenes, and I question why the writer's room didn't give her more material to work with. It was kind of like they just got rid of her character, and by the time the season finale was on, she was barely even a part of the show. That's what it felt like. And so I guess fun scenes for me, or scenes that stand out for me, are any scene with her son, because that's an interesting relationship.
Absolutely.
Very.
With him coming to terms with who she is and loving her, and the angstiness of it, even with her wife. And And yeah, like I said, those fun scenes when it first started, I enjoyed learning her backstory. Like she was a firefighter who was, writing bad checks and making her medical transition happen, So that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. I now want to pivot slightly.
Wait, what are your favorite scenes?
Oh, well, I do love this moment. She goes back and forth with one of the white girls about her hair, about the white girl's hair. I can't remember the details, but to your point, there's the most memorable things that pop up to me are often the comedic elements,
right.
moments. And in that first season, especially,
There was a lot.
Yeah.
It had that.
First of all, you need a perm.
It gave very much that. Did you have one that you?
No, I mean, I liked a lot of the scenes with her in them. I mean, one that has stuck out in my mind is the scene where they're actually all confused about the female anatomy.
Oh yes, I forgot all about
I had
that.
to build my own, so I know.
I forgot all about that,
Yeah.
and she gives them the lesson. I do want to ask you really quickly. Sorry, you interview a journalist, you get a journalist. I do want to ask you what made you not want to watch the show, because it was a juggernaut. They were on the cover of Essence, and they were everywhere as the seasons unfolded.
So this is a weird thing about me. If I don't catch on a show organically and I don't have to do it for work, I often don't go back to catch it later.
Got you.
So like if the show's already started and we're like a season in or a few episodes in, and everybody's talking about it, everybody's watching it, for some reason I'm like, I missed the boat.
Yeah. Like, I'm good. I'm good.
I get it.
And then it becomes this thing after a while of me being like, okay, well, I haven't watched it. I might as well not watch it now. And then it just goes longer and longer and longer. And generally it only changes because I go to somebody's house and we're there for a weekend and they're like, oh, we're going to watch this. And then I end up going back and binging the entire thing. But it's literally no real reason. Okay. It wasn't like, oh, I saw this thing and I didn't like it. No, it was literally like, and it's weird because even though it was such a big project, I did find it weird that I made it so low without seeing it, and it never actually came up as like an issue. Like obviously I knew who Laverne was, so that wasn't so much of an issue. So yeah, anyways, that's all.
What a beautiful cast.
It's a gorgeous cast.
It was like all SVU alum, like a Law and Order alum, getting their moment to shine.
Okay.
That's how I look at them.
In another prison,
because we didn't know them. We only knew old girl from what is it? Third Rock from the Sun.
Sure, I didn't watch that one.
With the skinny eyebrows, the white lesbian girlfriend, the main character.
Well, this is Black
Laura
Queer
Prepon.
Canon. This is Black Queer Canon.
But I'm saying that's the only one that we knew.
Too.
We didn't know Danielle Brooks. We didn't know
Danny.
we didn't know these people. That's what I loved about it.
It did introduce us to
an entirely new cast.
Speaking of another entirely new cast and show that we were introduced to, Blanca is in our canon.
Yes.
So this is what, a number of years after Laverne has blown open the door in terms of Black trans visibility and that conversation, Pose comes in and I would say blows open another door, introduces most of us, I would say, to Michaela Jae Rodriguez. She plays Blanca Evangelista. What did you think when the show first dropped?
I loved it.
From the beginning.
From jump. I did. Now listen, this is controversial. I'm a little biased because, as I mentioned, Janet was once a mentor of mine, Angelica as well at one point. And so I was like really excited about it. But my controversial take is I really loved season 1.
Because most people say that it got better, like that once the white people left.
Yes, people say that it got better. Pose was only 3 seasons, right?
Yes.
Yeah, season 1 I loved. I remember that pivotal, I think it was episode 6. Because I remember like Janet, it was like her directorial debut and like looking forward to that. And it really was like one of those pivotal episodes. Season 2, totally, can I curse on here?
Sure can.
Totally fucked me up. Candy's murder. I still can't listen to Candy's sweet refrain. Every time the Stephanie Mills comes on, I get a little woo woo woo. And I hated season 3. I thought it was
that
rushed.
tracks.
It was so season 1 was my favorite, and Blanca, witnessing her growth, I felt that Michaela Jae was really the heart of the show, and witnessing her growth, because there was growth there. Okay, there was growth. I love you, Michaela. She's the Capricorn like me. Love you, girl. There was growth there, but I just felt drawn to the cast, and much to your point, Tre'vell, it was people I didn't know. Like these were actors that I didn't even know Billy Porter. And I know Billy Porter was a Broadway star with Kinky Boots and stuff. I didn't know who that was, but I loved Pray Tell season 1.
Okay.
Season 1.
Season 1.
Just underlining that.
Season 1. Bold and italicize that. Season 1, yeah.
Michael, were we working together at the time this show came out? I can't remember.
I don't. No.
Was
came
it
out in
2018?
I think we started working together a few months later.
Okay. So then what was your initial take on the show and Blanca specifically?
I mean, I like the show. You know, I write about ballroom and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a big year. Actually, that year was a big year for ballroom on TV because it was Pose, which was fiction, but then there was also My House that came out the same at the same
with
same
Precious.
month. Yep.
Yes, I remember that.
And
Fuse,
that was a
right?
docu-series. It was
Vice?
Vice.
Vice. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was super excited about that. But then the show, you know, I was interested in the show. You know, you obviously, when it started, it kind of, you know, was about, or supposed to be about, what's his name?
Evan Peters?
No.
Pray Tell?
No.
you're talking about
Ricky's
Damon.
boyfriend, Damon. You know, it was kind of starts off about them.
Where's my camera?
And then it did. It, you know, if you go back and watch the first
It
two
was supposed
episodes,
to
it was
be.
very clearly,
Yeah.
it was his
It was supposed
show.
to be his story, yes.
And then it changed, which was fine.
Yeah.
Episode 3, 6, something like that, it changed, which was
Oh,
fine.
yes, because he was kicked out of the house by his parents, and that's how he wound up in New York, and we get
That's how we
introduced
get
to the
introduced
girls.
to the scene.
Yes.
Right. I did really enjoy the first season. I thought that it was really interesting to do this sort of uptown, downtown, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that kind of texture. Obviously, I enjoyed seeing more ballroom and all that kind of stuff, but I did think it lost something when we only focused on the scene. But one of the things that I kept saying after the show and even during the show was what I thought Pose's legacy was going to be was giving the volume of people work in ways that, like, you just simply hadn't had work before, or if maybe you were working in sort of independent work, and because like even I think Michaela Jae and India, they had done these smaller projects before that.
Yeah.
They did.
You
They
know,
worked
Sunday
together.
school,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
And so, but I was like, but now they're getting this experience that people will quote unquote take seriously, right?
Yeah.
And even people from the ballroom scene, right? Maybe you make effects and stuff like that, and you want to work in Hollywood, or you want to work in these other places, but the resume that you have does not transfer into the industry. And so I thought Pose was going to be a way that maybe you could do something on Pose, and you know that kind of validates the rest of your resume, and you can get work. And so that's what I always thought of the legacy, no matter whether I thought the writing sometimes was a little wonky.
Yeah.
Well, very. We can call the writing what it was.
It was I liked season 1.
It was many things. It was many things.
It was many things. I mean, the soundtrack curation, and I mean, to your point, at one point, I did see a tweet of mine, an old tweet of mine that said it's a new dawn, a new day, a new light. And it was 4 magazine covers. And all 4 of the magazine covers were Black trans women, individual. I ain't talking about clustered and grouped.
Right.
And I remember at the time, like, I mean, Michaela Jae is the spokesperson for Charlotte Tilbury Cosmetics. India went on to do like Louis Vuitton, and she was in Queen and Slim. So it did at one point seem like at least certain cast members were getting opportunities to go different routes, and then just as quickly as it seems the star rose, it kind of plateaued.
Yeah,
that's what.
And interest changed, because I think India clocked out of Hollywood, Angelica clocked out of Hollywood. So it's like people's interest change as well.
Yeah, I don't even know if it plateaued. I think it fell. You know what I mean? I think the plateau would be to say that they continue to get jobs, right?
Yeah,
and I think it rose, and then they disappeared. You saw, like you were saying, right? There was this few years where India was on the cover of Elle, and she was, you know, like you
Louis
said,
Vuitton, Queen and Slim,
all these other things, and then you know even Dominique went on to book what was that? American Gods, I
Yes.
think she
Yes,
was
she was in
and-
season 2 of American
yeah, and
Gods.
she, she did a few things, and then
They worked for a little bit.
Angelica. Yeah, they all
Everybody worked
worked
for a
Oh yes,
little
Angelica
very
did
little
2
bit.
seasons
American
of Horror Story.
Yeah.
I forgot about
But
that.
but now when you look at it, many. I don't, I mean, Michaela Jae, right? Blanca has
Mhm.
continued to
still
work
working.
rather.
She's still with Charlotte
consistently.
Tilbury Cosmetics.
Okay.
Okay.
Still working.
Which I think partially also speaks to the character she played versus
Yeah.
the characters that some of those other trans folks played in the show. I don't know. But what I wanted to ask is with both of these characters, with Sophia,
I was about to
we
say,
gotta
if-
rewind.
yeah, 'cause if I may,
go for it.
if I may, when I think of someone like India Moore, I think that people had to learn that India is not Angel.
Sure.
And that affected some things as
Heard.
well. I think
Heard.
that maybe because oftentimes we do see this projection of characters,
Mhm.
and that can affect what you go on and do and how you do it.
Absolutely.
And when people learned that India was an angel, that changed the
Impacted some
conversation.
things.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
In my opinion, in my view.
I think they had to learn India was an angel. Yes. I also think that India and Angelica are, they're not the type of people who I think are interested in towing the line in the way that you have to get work.
Yeah.
In
Playing the
city.
Hollywood game.
Yeah, they're not interested in
Yeah.
that. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think both of them have said this at various times. You know what I mean? Like India Moore is going to the Met Gala and then, taking a photo of her from the Met Gala and then writing about the protests at the Met Gala. Right? Like
right.
those are things that,
Mhm.
and that's not shade to her. I think that she should do that. She should speak out on the issues that are important to her. But I think that those things are also things that, unfortunately, you're not going to get further in the industry. And that's not on her, that's on the industry, right? And so I think that absolutely impacted it. And I think some of the people who had, quote unquote, longer journeys were less likely to be as publicly vocal about those things.
For sure.
And then also the other thing the reason I wanted to spin the block is because also, only one of them got the Emmy.
The guy. You mean
No. No,
What-
Golden Globe.
Oh, you mean
Golden
Michaela.
Globe was
Michaela.
Michaela.
You know what I mean? I was like,
Michaela
You were
got
talking
it.
about when Billy said, "Wait your turn."
Right, no.
Well, I thought
At
that's
the
what
end.
you meant, but we're not going.
That's
we're not
another
going-
podcast.
We're not-
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's
Okay. He said, "This is my year, girl."
But to your point, in terms of the acting
Right.
on that show, out of the trans folks that we are talking about, Michaela Jae was the only one recognized with
Mhm.
an
She was.
award.
Yeah.
The show was nominated as a whole, various places, but she won the Golden Globe one of the pandemic years.
It was in the pandemic.
Yeah,
it was 2021.
It was one of the pandemic, so she didn't get
It was when
the-
Omicron was going around. That variant was released. Oh, excuse me, Omicron.
Omicron.
Omicron. I went to a HBCU, so it's Omicron.
Cut it out.
It's Omicron.
But one of the things I think is interesting, right, about both of these characters in comparison to another character that we have on the canon, the Lady Chablis,
Yes.
right? Though we have 3, Black trans women on our list. These characters served very different roles and purposes than I think a Lady Chablis character.
Mhm.
I think Laverne or Sophia
Burset
is on this list because of her role in kicking open a door
Mhm.
in how people in theory approach storytelling.
Mhm.
And then I think Blanca is on this list because this is the character that we did a little survey. This is the character that got, I want to say, second highest, maybe the highest vote out of anybody.
Yeah.
What was the survey? Like, who's the most important trans characters?
We did a survey, and not trans characters, but like Black LGBTQ characters. We had some open-ended questions, and in the end of it, we had this list of 40, 50 Black LGBTQ characters, and had folks rank. I believe you did this, by the way. It's so funny you don't recall it.
Oh, yes, that was the Google survey.
Google survey.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But then at the end, we had this like list of 50 people and had people rank their top 8.
Mhm.
And Blanca was the second highest, I believe, vote getter, which I think is a byproduct of it being probably a recent
Yeah.
show, so very, very present of mind.
But also it speaks to her being the heart, to your
Absolutely,
point. I
yes,
think that
there you go.
that Sophia's character opened a conversation. There were, giggles, but like I said, at one point, she was put in solitary confinement and was rocking a fro, and we saw her 4 episodes out of 13. It's like she won. And I think that Blanca, because I think about some of the conversations that like my mother and some of my aunts were having as they were watching Pose. Everybody was in tears about Candy, by the way.
Absolutely.
Everybody. Didn't matter if you were cis, trans, 64 or 14. And I think that show further helped humanize trans women in particular and the plight, and you got a front row seat to see what it was like to apply for a job and get denied, and then why you had to turn to Evan Peters. You also got a front row seat. I think that's why I liked season 1 so much, because of James Vanderbeek's in Trump Tower. There was something to be said about him working there. Like that was intentional. And that Evan Peters storyline is very common in one way or another. And yeah, I just think that Blanca just appealed to so many people because she was mother.
Yeah.
I'm his mother. Like she told the when she was enrolling him in school, I'm his mother,
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying, sort of it humanized it. And I think that there was a difference in like Blanca and
Sophia.
No, sorry. And
Lady Chablis?
No.
Candy.
The other mother.
Electra.
The other
right,
mother.
is that
Oh, the
like
colorism.
no offense, but like Electra wouldn't be the heart of a show, right?
No.
Because there's a hardness there.
Yes.
That Blanca only has when she needs.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that is why she partially is on the list, right? Is I think people identified with, just how, I hate this phrase when people say like, oh, she's just a human just like me. But I think that's very much what people were feeling. And that's why I think the role resonated with so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know any Blancas in Chicago. Everybody I knew was Electra. Okay, they serve you a nasty read and tell you to get out the way. Okay? So it was nice to see. Yeah, I think that that show gave you a range of characters because we had never seen an ensemble cast like that.
Absolutely.
So it gave you a range of personalities. There was the naivete of Angel and the meanness really of Electra, and how they positioned Candy. Pray Tell told her 666 mark of the beast. That was her score. That's something I'll never forget. Because he was bullying.
That's right there.
Because he was really bullying her. The episode that Candy is murdered, Pray Tell was being so awful to her. And that's what added to it for me. Sorry, we're going off script.
No,
fine.
it is totally fine. I do want to ask,
Yes.
how do you think, Laverne, or how do you think Sophia, and because we're doing the characters, it's not about the actors, y'all.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. How do you think Sophia and Blanca stack up against other, Black trans women scripted characters that you've seen, either, past tense or even current?
We ain't got that many.
Well, yes.
I think that they are, I'd venture to say, the Beyonce and Kelly of it. Like they are the top. I think if you were to take a survey with Americans,
Yeah.
I think that you would get the same results. We'd be here talking about Sophia and Blanca again because they were the titans when I think of trans representation in Hollywood that was favorable, but also gave you complexities and wasn't just flat in one note. Like you saw the full human scope of both of these women. And so I think that's where they land.
I love that. Good. That's why they made it onto our little list. Okay.
Yes.
Well, Shar, thanks so much for giving us a little bit of your time to come and talk about Sophia and Blanca.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
2 of my favorite characters. I might revisit Orange is the New Black, though. I haven't watched it in so long.
Probably for the best.
I know. Or maybe not. I just want to laugh. There's a lot going on in the world.
It is.
Maybe I'll put on a rom-com.
Do
I'll
something
just,
else.
maybe I can watch Clean Slate instead.
Special thanks again to our guest this week, Hope you tune in next week to Black Queer Canon, and be sure to subscribe to this here channel for more. Black Queer Canon is a production of Slayzhon. It is created, hosted, and executive produced by Mikelle Street and Tre'vell Anderson. Chris Rodgers is our associate producer and editor. For more Black Queer Canon, visit us at blackqueercanon.com. You can also follow the show on IG at Slayzhon and subscribe to our Slayzhon YouTube page to watch the video versions of our episodes weekly. Black Queer Canon is supported by Critical Minded, an initiative to invest in cultural critics of color, co-founded by the Nathan Cummings Foundation and the Ford Foundation.